Welcome to You, Me, Empathy. Thank you for listening. We would like to remind you that this podcast is for informational and entertainment purposes only, and is not a substitute for medical advice, diagnosis, or treatment. Known as just a silly boy with a feely heart. Please consider supporting the show. Check us out on Patreon or simply leave a review on iTunes. Here's your host and creator of the show, Known Wells.
Hello, feely humans. Welcome to another episode of your favorite podcast. It's You, Me, Empathy. Hello. My name is Known Wells, and I am the creator of this show. And today, in episode 102, I am embracing emotions at work with. I don't want to say with. I think I was combining with and Liz. With Liz Fosslien. Liz is a lovely feely human, and she is the co-author of the book No Hard Feelings. She also created Liz and Molly. If you're not following Liz and Molly on Instagram, do that pronto. They're at Liz and Molly, Mollie. And it's great. Liz is a fountain of knowledge. A fount of knowledge. I don't know which was right. She is a fountain of knowledge, or a fount, and she's great. And we talk a lot about embracing emotions at work. We also talk about safe spaces we need to feel our feelings and how small moments can sometimes be the most transformative in our lives. It's a great episode. Episode 102. Before we get to it, though, please, if you haven't, please, cherry on top, leave a review for You, Me, Empathy in Apple Podcasts. It only takes a minute, and I would love you forever. I already love you forever, but please do it anyways. I will love you forever times infinity. How about that? Leave a review. That'd be great. And also follow the show on Instagram and Twitter at You, Me, Empathy, and also join the Facebook group. That's at facebook.com/groups/You, Me, Empathy. Join there and join a community of feely humans. And what else? Oh, speaking of community, as you know, I've been working on a new project, and it should be out early next year. Actually, as of this recording, it's out, I think. Who knows? I'm recording this in the past. No, that's not true. I'm getting my timelines mixed up. This is coming out today, which is November 11th. And my thing isn't out, but I've teased it, and I just wanted to say that pretty soon you'll be hearing a little bit more. So look out for that. Make sure you're following along on Instagram at You, Me, Empathy. Okay, let's get to the episode. This is episode 102 about embracing emotions at work with Liz Fosslien. Welcome to You, Me, Empathy, a podcast about exploring the struggles we face in our day-to-day lives as humans trying to get by on this wondrous and overwhelming pale blue dot. The intent of You, Me, Empathy is to talk openly, without judgment, about our mental health, our neuroses, our shared anxieties and worries, to create a dialogue that is vulnerable and deeply human and empathetic, and to share that dialogue with others to inspire emotional and cognitive collaboration and insight, so we can, hand in hand, break down the stigma that make us feel shame and guilt for struggling, for feeling our feelings, for being feely humans. You, Me, Empathy is a safe, friendly space designed to inspire the beauty in each of us. Today I'm feeling all the things because I'm here in Empathy Land with writer, illustrator, behavioral science explorer, and author of No Hard Feelings, The Secret Power of Embracing Emotion at Work. It's Liz Fosslien. Hello, Liz.
Hi, nice to be here. I'm excited for the conversation.
Yeah, I'm excited to have you. I heard about you and your book through the podcast, The Accidental Creative, which
Mm.
my friend and colleague Mindy brought my attention to, and Todd Henry, who runs that, used to work with us and many years ago. So I was like, oh, serendipity. That's cool.
Yeah, that's super cool.
Well, for the listeners, we're going to talk about Liz's awesome book, which I just ordered today from my local bookshop. It is Independent Bookstore Day, listeners, so go to your local bookshop, and if they don't have No Hard Feelings, make sure they order it so you can pick up a copy and support independent bookstores. Um, but today we're going to talk about the book and Liz's story and all of that goodness. But before we do that, we always have a little emotional check-in at the top. How are you doing? How are you feeling? How has your week been, Liz?
I'm feeling good. I'm glad it's the weekend. This week, I'm normally based in San Francisco, but I traveled to New York for work, and now I'm in Chicago with my family. So it's been a lot of trying to still do work while traveling. So I'm ready to just relax and have kind of a cozy weekend.
Cozy's nice. Um, I've always struggled with the idea of working like on planes and things. I don't know what it is. I don't, maybe it's my attention span or focus, but whenever I'm traveling, I just kind of I want to let my mind wander a bit. And I struggle with focusing on work when I travel.
Yeah, I think I'm a little bit the opposite. I really don't like to travel. Like, I just feel claustrophobic in planes and I don't like waiting at the airport. So for me, working actually allows me, like, I want to focus on something so that I'm not so aware that I'm in a plane. So working is kind of like my way of passing the time and like doing something constructive to kind of take my mind off of the fact that I'm like floating in space thousands of feet above the ground.
Yeah, the death is imminent. Yeah, I hear that. I guess I can relate to that a bit because I personally, yeah, I agree. I'm not a huge fan of planes. Like if I could drive everywhere, it would be fantastic. But driving takes forever.
Yeah, so
Yeah,
sometimes you just gotta fly.
sometimes. Yeah. Well, I hope the weekend is cozy for you. I like a cozy weekend. I wanted to, for me, this week has been some ups and downs, but I have something exciting brewing, which by the time this episode comes out, I should be sort of announcing it already. There's a really fantastic organization called Project Heal, and they're eating disorder awareness and sort of recovery organization, nonprofit, and I applied to be a volunteer for their first ever camp. It's called Camp Heal, where I will be just like a camp counselor, which is very exciting. And I'll get to do a couple like workshops for people who are sort of in their earlier stages of eating disorder recovery,
Mm.
which I'm excited about. So Liz, for your information, I am in recovery from anorexia myself, 10 plus years or so in recovery. And I'm just excited to kind of do that and give back. And the camp will be up in LA. I'm really excited about it.
Yeah, that sounds awesome. I'm excited for you. It sounds like a great cause. I've heard of Project Heal before, but I wasn't aware that they were doing more like camp setting stuff.
Yeah, no, yeah, thanks. It's this camp. It's like the first time they're trying it out.
Mm.
Arwen Turner is the as the CEO of Project Heal, and I forget the creators, but really great, really sort of open-hearted people, and I hope to kind of continue to work with them, and I'm excited about the prospect of doing a couple of little workshops because one of my sort of grand visions for the work I do here on this podcast is to one day like actually like make a business and do workshops and on
Mm.
empathy and vulnerability and these sorts of things I believe deeply in. So maybe I'll be a little sort of trial run, which should be fun.
Yeah, super cool.
Well, Liz, let's get into your story. I kind of like to start these conversations with the question: could you give me a couple of seminal moments from your childhood, your youth, your adulthood? Just kind of a couple of moments that stick out in your noggin as being pivotal sort of moments in your career or in your own mental health journey, your own sort of emotional intelligence journey, just a couple of moments that stick out as being really kind of important.
Yeah, so three come to mind. And the first is I went to a really small creative Montessori school through eighth grade, and there were 15 people in my class. And so I spent like the first, I don't know, until I was 12 with these same people, and we had formed really close connections. And then I went to a really large public high school that none of my friends from the smaller school went to. And I remember that, like, it was such a shock to suddenly be in with so many people at that age that I didn't know. I felt like a complete outsider. And it was also really different to suddenly just sit in a chair for 8 hours a day. So Montessori style teaching is very like hands-on. You do projects. It's all interdisciplinary. So math is more blended with art than it is in a traditional curriculum. And so to me, suddenly having all of these subjects like ripped apart felt really, I just didn't love math like I used to, because I was used to building like little 3D geodesic domes and having these like real world problems to solve. And suddenly it was just like rote formulas and memorizing.
Sure.
So that I had a really hard time in high school. I think it was just a really rough transition for me. And I didn't have any tools to deal with suddenly all these emotions I was feeling, to even think about how do I actually like try and branch out and make friends. I think I just felt so overwhelmed and afraid that I kind of shut down. But then senior year, I became a little more extroverted and then had a great time in college. And then that leads me to my second pivotal moment, which was when I studied economics and math in college and then became a consultant. And it was very much like I thought I was successful. I was putting on the fancy suit, and I was going into an office building and going to a tall floor. And so I was like, check, check, check. I'm doing well. But the work was very much just stats based. So looking into a spreadsheet, and it was really long hours. And I think looking back, the work wasn't creative or meaningful to me. And so I just tried. At the time, I really thought too that, especially as a female in the workplace, I shouldn't show any emotion, and you just put your head down and you just work. And then ultimately somehow this wasn't even a fully formed path or something. It was just like, okay, if I keep working, I'll be happy one day. And that suppression I actually started getting after about a year, like severe migraines, to the point where I finally realized, like, I just have to quit this job. I can't keep doing this. It's not sustainable. And I'm not going to be successful in this field because my body is actually rejecting this job. So that's my second one. And then my third one is not my current partner, but my partner before that was an artist and a producer and much more emotionally expressive than I was at the time, and then anyone I knew. And I remember once I had an anxiety attack and he was there, and I just really wanted him to leave because I had never shown that part of myself to anyone. I still tried to be this sort of consummate professional, or at least a woman who has kind of her life together in a real way. And he just sat with me and he said, "It's okay. I just love you, and this is a part of you, and I love this part too, and I'm here with you." And I remember, to me, that moment just stands out as the first time in my life, really, that someone had said, "It's okay. This doesn't make you a worse human. It doesn't make you unlikable. It's just another part of you, and we all go through this, and I'm just here for you, whether you're anxious, whether you're not." To me, it's that specific moment that I think allowed me later to kind of unlock my emotions and be there for my friends in a more real way and share more of myself with others.
That's wow, amazing. I think that when we can be that for others, it's such like because we've all had that experience with people where we aren't sure about sharing our emotions and maybe fear it and maybe don't know how to, and then being met with such grace and kindness and acceptance is such a huge like motivator. It's such a huge like relief.
Yeah. And it doesn't, it wasn't a very expensive therapy session, or, I mean, not that there's anything wrong with that, but I think we often forget it's just these really small gestures and moments that are the ones that can be so transformational and just stick with people years later. And often it just comes down to sitting there and saying, I'm not going anywhere. I'm going to listen. What do you need? And that's, it's not that much. So that's something also, and we can talk about this later, but in the book, just so much of our happiness and our mental health, I think, comes down to creating these small moments of compassion for each other.
Yeah, you're right. I think it is important to recognize and call out that there are these small moments that can be transformational, because it allows us as humans who may be feeling like, well, what can I do? I'm not a therapist. What can I do? I'm not a doctor. But like the truth is, like, all of us can do and enact so much change in each other by just meeting people where they are, just listening, just being present, and just meeting people, just seeing them for what they're going through and accepting their experience. Lately I've been doing a lot of thinking and writing about validation and invalidation. And there's so many things that we do, I think sometimes even unconsciously, like, and indirectly, we can even invalidate people's own experiences. And that's the opposite of what your experience was like. That would maybe make someone turn inward and not want to kind of express their emotions. But if we can validate them and just, we don't have to like therapize them. We don't have to, get into it. It's just really about showing up,
Yeah. Yeah. There's, it reminds me of John Gottman, who the Gottmans are really, they're like the marriage experts, and they have this concept of bids for attention, which are all about, in any relationship, platonic or romantic, we're constantly bidding for attention. And so if someone turns to you and says, hey, what's the weather forecast? They, like, if I ask you that, I can definitely look that up on Google, but I'm just trying to have a little moment. And so they've found that successful relationships, you return the bid 85% of the time, somewhere around there. And that's just turning to someone and saying, oh, it's supposed to be sunny, or, oh, let's look it up together, as opposed to being like, just look it up on Google. And again, it's like these two really small things, but they found that the people that really gel, that like feel in harmony or are happy with each other, respond even in a really small way to this bid for attention.
Oh, that's so interesting. Yeah, I've done some reading on Gottman, and that's fascinating because, like, my wife always asks me like what the time is, and she's like holding her phone in her hand.
Yeah.
Maybe I need to be less like flippant and more accepting of the fact.
I think there's some times when you can be like, I love you, but you gotta look at your phone.
It's in your hand, my dear.
Yeah.
That's amazing. Yeah. So when you sort of had this moment with your previous partner, like going into it, what were you feeling? What were you projecting, thinking about, like, oh, he's going to reject me. He's going to, was it fear? What was going on emotionally?
Yeah, it was a lot of fear and a lot of, just having never exposed that part of myself to anyone, I don't know if I'd ever been made a conscious decision to sit down and say, I will never show anyone my anxious side, but I've always been afraid that it would make them doubt me or just not want to be around me, because I also beat myself up about it so much internally. There's one of the worst things we can do when we're feeling bad is to make ourselves feel bad about feeling bad.
Right.
And I was very much doing that. And so I think yeah, I was afraid that he would suddenly not want to be with me anymore, or think that I was broken, or that it made me unlovable in some way, or that because it was a moment of weakness, it would cause him to turn away. And it's so interesting since then. And it's, I don't, this isn't like deeply revolutionary, but when it's the first time that it happens to you, it feels like it is. And so since then, it is so many of my friendships and relationships have deepened because of those moments, not in spite of. And so I think that really, and it allowed me later just to feel more free and to feel more comfortable and accepted. So yeah, I think it really came from a place of fear.
Yeah, no, that makes sense. Did you, like, growing up, being in this Montessori school and feeling sort of connected there, like how were you raised? Like, what was your childhood like in terms of sort of the emotional stuff happening? Was it, did you feel safe? You said this was kind of your first time kind of opening up. Like, what was the sort of emotional vibe of the household?
Yeah, I definitely felt safe. And I've always known, I'm an only child, and my parents are immigrants. My dad is from Norway, my mom's from Germany. And I've always known deeply that they loved me and cared about me. I think they came from cultures where you're just more stoic and there's not as much emotional expression. And also, being immigrants in the US, I think very much drilled into me a work ethic, and
right.
that you do put your head down, and if you want it, you can make it happen, but it just requires a lot of work. But you should be grateful for your opportunities. And so I think it implicit in that was, I think when you focus so much on always express gratitude, there's no space to be upset or to be anxious. And also, like, I have, and since then, I think I've learned that, like, if you're suffering no matter what your circumstances are. But at the time, I remember as a teenager, I was like, I don't know why I'm so sad, because it's true. Like, I have parents that love me. I'm not in a war-torn country. Not that they grew up there either, but there, you can always look at the positives of your situation. But I think you can't look at the positives and then suppress any negative emotions you have. It's just so important to acknowledge those negative emotions and work through those as well. And so I think growing up, there was never a space, and I was never given tools to deal with the negative emotions. And so I then began to see them as these things that I really needed to package up and put to the side or get rid of. Or when I felt something negative, it was really bad and it was shameful. Because it just meant that I wasn't working hard enough, or I wasn't grateful enough. And those, I think, are not healthy skills. And it's interesting now that I'm older and am equipped with the tools to navigate negative emotions and actually have constructive conversations around them. It's changed my relationship with my parents too. I think in my journey, I've kind of brought them along a little bit. And I think we've deepened our relationships too, because I've been able to now go to them and say, like, hey, here's what's good in my life, but here's what I'm struggling with. And then I've been really pleasantly surprised at what they are finally responding to. And we're sharing stories in a way that we didn't when I was younger.
Oh, that's nice. That's really nice. It is amazing to me how, and the more stories I hear on this show, and certainly my story as well, the commonality of experience in terms of growing up. Like, I had a fairly rough childhood in a sense, but also there was joy and bright spots. But the commonality between my experience and your experience and so many others is, like, not having the tools, not developing the tools, not having that teaching, that education, that component of, like, at a young age, like, how do we get to a place where we can start navigating those and thinking and being curious about our emotions? And then, it's only into our adulthood where we're starting to kind of explore these things. Like, my hope, and I'm guessing this is your hope too, you tell me otherwise, is, we start to tackle these things earlier, like the generations, but after us, there's more sort of emotional intelligence work done at an earlier age.
Yeah, I think that would be so valuable for so many people. There's also, I think it's at Yale, they have an emotional intelligence center, and there they have classes that are for very small children that are about teaching them. A lot of it is as simple as labeling emotions and saying, okay, you don't feel bad. What do you feel? Are you frustrated? Are you angry? Are you jealous? And even that skill is super valuable because when we label things, we're better able to understand them and work through them. And I think I definitely I think even at 20, I was like, I feel bad. I'm going to ignore it. It's just this bad package. And I would never try and figure out like, well, what does that mean? Where is it coming from? What are the specific feelings? So I think that's a really positive signal that there are spaces that are popping up for very small children to become more emotionally intelligent.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, I was in my late 20s before I started to have develop the tools. I'm 37 now, and I'm still learning. I think it's going to be sort of a life learning process, but it's all interesting. And I'm wondering, so for you, so I was talking to my wife this morning about talking to you, and she's a professor at a community college. She's an English professor, and the environment there, which I think maybe is potentially similar to like sort of more sort of workplace environments, is very, very focused on, like, she's just working all the time. Like it's unbelievable, like how much she has to work. And she told me she doesn't really feel space to have the opportunity to sort of express her emotions in that environment. And she said she wouldn't even know how to go about doing that. Whereas for me, I work, in a tiny team. We're like a little startup. There's like 10 of us. Mm-hmm. And we have weekly retrospectives on Fridays where each of us go through kind of like the ups and downs of our work lives and personal lives even. And I've been open about my depression, and it's actually a beautiful thing where like I can kind of talk about sort of what's going on and maybe how that's impacting my work life and personal life, and people are there to listen and just to validate, right? Mm-hmm. How do we get better at getting it more toward, because like, I mean, obviously I'm comparing maybe apples and oranges, like very small team to like a large sort of university or a large business. Like how do we translate sort of the small sort of group stuff where I know everyone to the sort of bigger organizations? Yeah.
So one of the most basic things that my co-author Molly and I recommend at bigger organizations is just to have lunch together. There's just too many offices where people just grab something at the vending machine or they run out and get something and then they eat at their desk. And it's true that in some jobs, it's high stress. There's a lot to be done. You're understaffed. And so it feels bad to take big chunks of big breaks. But 20 minutes for lunch with your colleagues, there's something very fundamental about like literally breaking bread with other people. And just having that time in the middle of the day, you build in this break in which you can get to know each other. And so a lot of people come to us. So the book is all about emotions in the workplace. And a lot of people come to us and ask, I'm bought in. I want to talk more about emotions with my colleagues. I want to get to know them better. How do I start doing this? And if you work in an office where this is a totally new concept, it can't start about the work. You can't just immediately sit everyone down in a team meeting and say, let's all talk about how we feel about this project. It's too much. But you just start by forming real relationships with people. And so one is to have lunch together. One is to just go and grab coffee with a colleague. There's a lot of research that supports the importance of taking those 10-minute breaks, even a 5-minute break, going outside, walking around. It feels like you can't do it, like there's not enough time, but you'll actually be more productive if you take that break. You'll feel better. It's linked with everything good in the workplace. And then there's also research that shows that actually the most mood boosting breaks are the ones that you take with a colleague and you learn something with each other or you form a connection, because it not only makes that 5 minutes nicer, but it increases your feelings of belonging throughout the day.
Right.
So I think just taking it to reach out to a colleague saying, hey, I'm going to grab a cup of coffee. Do you want to go with me? Or, hey, I'm just going to walk around the block. Do you want to head out with me? And again, these are like often 5-minute breaks that can do a lot to increase your happiness. So I would say starting there, which is just kind of reaching out to the people around you and just realizing that you can take the 5-10 minute break. It's not going to ruin your day. It's actually going to make it better. And it's going to create a work life for you that is more sustainable in the long run.
I hear you, and it's like it makes perfect sense to me, creating these really intentional connection points with other humans. Like that's what the show's about. Like that's what I feel like, how we sort of recover and how we sort of heal in our mental health and grow and learn as humans. But on the sort of like the playing the devil's advocate, like I feel like I've been hearing a lot of this data and research for a long time, like being in various corporate environments, like, take the 5-minute break. It's going to allow you to be more efficient and all these things. And yet there is still this, I mean, not for me in my current work environment, thankfully, but like I've had very unhealthy work environments, and you feel this pressure. There's like this unspoken pressure to like, you gotta fucking crush it, like it's like
Yeah.
this weird pressure to like always be on, and that feels inhuman to me.
Yeah.
Like, how do you reconcile that?
Yes. So I would say, unfortunately, I think there are a lot of organizations out there that are still what you just described, which is we need to power through, crush it. My day job is I work at a company called Humu, which was started by the person who led HR at Google for 10 years and left a few years ago. And they tried to approach these questions from a data-backed perspective. And so I do have hope, because the company that I work at now, we're going into some of these really large organizations that might have similar cultures. And we're actually building out a financial case for why it is better, why like the you can crush it or you should crush it requires employees to be happier and healthier. And so I think that it's going to take a lot, but I do feel hope that there's enough research coming out and that there are enough companies that are actually looking internally and trying to looking at the data and building a financial case for taking breaks, for giving people vacation, for doing small things like, structuring meetings so that you have a pre-mortem where you talk about issues that might come up or how you want to work together to avoid people blowing up at each other. And you have a post-mortem where you talk about what went wrong, what could have gone better, what are people feeling, what do you want to change next time, and actually measure the financial impact of that. Because I also I used to work when I was a consultant, a lot of these people, they just wanted the data. And I think, unfortunately, they still see emotion as this like woo-woo thing that it's great, it's fun, but we don't need to care about it. And so to those people, I do think it's really important that someone is able to build a real financial case for why all these things that you and I can intuit are valuable show up in tenure, show up in productivity, in innovation, and how people just feel about work. So if you think about how much time it takes a company to recruit, interview, onboard, everything, like buy a new computer for someone, it's very expensive to bring on a new employee. And so it just makes no sense that you would bring this person on and then not want them to stay at your company for a long time and be happy and tell all their friends about how great the place they work at is and invite them to join too. So I think coming at it from different angles and depending on what someone will respond to, having a case that shows that can do a lot.
I the data piece of it is very compelling. I was talking to Chris Brogan. Do you know him?
I don't.
He's been in sort of the business world, and he's like an advisor to business. He's a really sweet guy, and he's been talking a lot more about sort of being open about sort of emotions in the workplace as well. And we were talking about just like I hear what you're saying, Liz, and I'm on board. But there's a strange part of me that's still a little bit cynical about culture shifts. Like, and what I mean by that is like, I've been in work environments where it's almost like you feel you have this sense that like HR or like the higher ups have like, okay, like, there's this data that says like we need to do this thing. Let's implement this sort of workshop or whatever, where no one goes to, and or you're forced to go to, and then you feel like this is boring and I'm not getting anything out of it. But it's almost like they have to it's like a checking of boxes. Like, so it's almost like I feel like, yes, data, like I agree, like it's obviously very compelling to people who are higher ups and are thinking about data and how it pertains to the profit line and all that stuff and the happiness of people. But like, is that the engine for really transforming the culture? Because like, I feel like there's still, I guess I'm just saying the same thing over and over again, but, and maybe it just takes time, but I'm still maybe, and I'm not a cynical person, but I feel like I'm a little cynical about like, how do we truly transform the culture of business? And really, obviously the numbers component and the data is compelling, and you can't argue with data, but like, for me, from my perspective, and I'll get off my soapbox in just a moment, but for me, as being a very highly sensitive person, very feely, and that component of my core truly saved my life, like no joke. So like me coming from that perspective, like, and seeing such power and growth and learning in sort of emotions and feelings and like all these things. And then like, it's like, I want other people to see that. Like, I want them to really see that and truly like take it into their hearts, like, how do we bridge that gap?
Yeah. So I think the questions you're asking aren't cynical. I think they're just realistic. And so the data angle is more, yes, it's focused at leadership, and it's focused at the leadership that might be older and not as in touch with their feelings and resistant to the idea that we should create space for people to learn from and actually be motivated by and inspired by their emotions. So I think that's one element of driving change across the business world. And unfortunately, I think some people just need to look at numbers. That said, I agree. I think you're not going to change a culture with data, because you can put numbers on the board and you can stare at them all day, and it's still not going to help you understand what it means to be empathetic. It might actually pull you away from empathy in some cases.
Right.
So I would say the things that work it comes down again to these smaller moments. So I do, and this we hear a lot as well when we speak or in response to the book, is people are like, okay, I want to change the culture. I feel totally overwhelmed. What can I do? I'm just one person. And you probably can't drive change throughout your entire organization if it's 20,000 people around the world, but you can on your team, or you can with a group of colleagues, and that can go a long way. And so small things that you can do are just learn to pronounce people's names and spell them correctly. If you see someone get interrupted in a meeting, don't put the onus on them to speak up. Just step in and say, hey, I noticed you interrupted. Do you want to finish your thought? if someone joins a conversation, just stop the conversation and say, hey, this is what we're talking about. Here's who everyone is. And just like actually welcome them into that conversation. Thank people. One of my coworkers, she on her phone, she just keeps track of what people's favorite treats are at the coffee shop.
Oh.
And then when they do something really sweet, she knows exactly what to get them as a thank you. And so again, these are things that anyone can do. And usually once you start modeling that behavior, it will be returned. Because I think just people, even if they're cynical, even if they're hard on the outside, like we all just want to be cared about. And it's a basic human need to feel belonging. And if someone is actively showcasing like how they're trying to create belonging for you and going out of their way to do that, I think you will respond in kind. And if you work in a place where you're really doing this and people don't start to respond, then I think you just have
They're monsters.
Yeah. Or you also, I mean, and I know that like not everyone has the privilege to be able to just like go to a different job, but I would really advise you to start looking for other opportunities. Because also when we talk about the companies that are really profitable now, I think a lot of the companies that are wildly profitable and are treating their employees really poorly, I don't know if they're going to be the most profitable in 10 years or 20 years as more and more people start to stand up and say, I don't feel good in this workplace. Or as we start to be like, I'm getting physically sick because of this job and I want to work somewhere else. So my advice would be to like start acting on the change that you want to see. And hopefully that's reciprocated and it kind of ripples throughout your team. And if it doesn't, if you're met with no response, then really start looking for, well, I think making a list of like what kind of people do I want to work with and how can I identify some organizations that might be a little healthier for me.
I think that's great. That's really well said. And it's like be the change you want to see in the world. And I think that's a very hopeful message. Like I do agree, because like when you're passionate about a thing and it's really meaningful to you, you want to enact big change, right? You tend to, at least maybe me, I'll put this on me, I tend to want to just kind of jump multiple steps to at a time. But the truth is, maybe we can't enact huge change in each sort of swing, but I think you're right, Liz, that we can maybe change one person at a time. Allow them to see how sort of connecting that experience can be.
Yeah, and I think it's definitely we should still be looking for opportunities to drive bigger change. And I think having a podcast that brings people on to just speak really openly and vulnerably is a great, you're reaching a lot of people by doing that. But I think I just never, so I live in San Francisco and the whole focus is around growth and does this scale? And I just never want people to lose in the face of that, just the joy of a small win or like a small interaction that can do a lot for someone. I run these workshops at companies about belonging and when do you feel belonging in an organization? And that's a question that I pose to the group. And then I have them form duos and discuss that and then share out whatever they're comfortable sharing. And it's so interesting to see, because a lot of people have the same question, like, how do we change the organization? How do we change the culture? And then the stories of when people felt belonging, they're always these really small moments. And again, that's not to say we shouldn't focus on bigger change, but just never underestimating the power of just being kind to someone, or, if you see them crying, not getting really awkward about it, checking in with them afterwards, handing them a tissue, just being there for someone doesn't require that much. And it actually, like when you asked me, one of my most profound emotional moments was like this one sentence that someone said to me.
Yeah, no, that's amazing. And empathy is a big part of that, I think.
Yeah.
And no, I love that. I think it's a really hopeful message because it can be overwhelming. I want to go back to something you said. You kind of intimated briefly about sort of maybe the sort of gender differences in this sort of scenario. for instance, there's this. There's a lot of misogyny still in the world, and sexism, which is vile and should die slow death, quick death. Let's call it quick death. But there's maybe a fear for women, for instance, to speak up for fear of like being called, quote unquote whiny or like, oh, you're just, have you interacted with those sort of gender differences between, like, in terms of sort of embracing emotions at work?
Yeah, the first thing that actually comes to mind is crying at work. And I think there's a really big misconception. So there was this researcher who asked a bunch of employees about crying at work, and the men they seemed to be afraid of making women cry because they thought that it was sadness. Like they said, oh, I don't want to give her harsh feedback, or not harsh, but useful critical feedback, or I just don't want to be as honest because I'm afraid that she'll get sad and cry. And most of the women said, when I cry in the workplace, it's not because I'm sad, it's because I'm extremely frustrated. And so I think that's a really good example of just a misperception of how we express emotion. But I would say, so two other things. One is, yes, I think women face this double bind where if they speak up, they're aggressive, and if they don't, then they're weak and they're not leadership material.
Right.
And so one thing I would encourage women to do is don't hide all of your emotions because you're afraid of that. So I think that there are ways to speak to your emotions without getting emotional. And there's a lot of research that shows that leaders who do express some level of emotion without being overly anxious or destabilizing the entire team are actually better leaders because we trust them more. So, for example, if a leader is announcing a difficult quarter or maybe even something as horrible as layoffs, if there's no emotional expression, if they act like a robot, I don't want to work for that person because
Right.
It's scary. It's scary that they can make these decisions and it doesn't seem to affect them at all. The other thing is women, I think being at least socialized to be more in touch with their emotions, and definitely women are socialized to talk more about their emotions. That can be also extremely valuable as a leader. Women can listen more. They can be more empathetic. And again, I'm saying this because of how we're socialized. Like, I think men can absolutely do this too.
Yeah.
But it's more just encouraging women not to just fully close their emotional selves off, but to look for the really positive aspects that might engage your workers. If you're really excited about something, be excited. It's really nice when, as a employee, you do something and your manager's excited for you. You should show that. And so just look for opportunities to express emotion. And then for men, I would say, I think that the way that we're socialized has also deeply hurt men because they are encouraged, it's boys will be boys and you can scuffle and you can be angry and all that's fine. But God forbid that you're vulnerable or that's weakness, or if a man cries, I think that's even more taboo than if a woman cries in the office. And so again, I would encourage men to just step outside of that gender role a little bit and think about when researchers looked at like who makes the best leader, the number one asset was emotional intelligence. And so men can also benefit from leaning in a little more to emotional expression. I'll share one more story and then I'll let you speak again. We open the book with Howard Schultz, who was the CEO of Starbucks. He had been the CEO almost from the beginning of Starbucks, and then he left in the early 2000s. And then in the recession in 2008, Starbucks sales started declining rapidly, and they were worried that they were going to have to lay off a bunch of employees. And so he decided to come back and become CEO again and turn the company around. And when he thought about it, he really he really wanted to make sure that they didn't have to lay off people because he knew that people depended on those salaries. And so when he took the stage, the first thing he did was he just allowed himself to cry a little bit. And then he kind of composed himself, and then he provided a clear path forward. But part of that path forward was also, he said, my inbox is open. If I don't care who you are at this organization, if you have any feedback for how we can make this company better, often the baristas actually know way better than management what we need to do. Email me, like just send me an email. And then the company was able to turn around and people really rallied around him. So I think that's such a wonderful example of a man standing up, expressing emotion, but then still having a plan and inviting feedback, being vulnerable, saying, I don't have all the answers, but I want to get all the answers. You might have them. Let's work together. And it really worked in that situation. So yeah, I think both genders can benefit from just like effective emotional expression and like being vulnerable in moments.
100%. Yeah. And I love that. That's such a powerful moment with Howard. Howard, it's like I call him by his first name, Mr. Schultz. You know, and you mentioned inclusivity and like feeling of belonging. Like, what an amazing gesture that is to say, like, look, I'm the CEO, you're a barista, but like I'm here to talk, like I'm here to listen.
Mm-hmm.
Like that's huge.
Yeah, definitely. And it's just also thinking about, if I were an employee, that would make me so much more loyal to the organization and just feel happier about it. So yeah, I think there's a lot of benefits to vulnerability.
Thinking about sort of embracing emotions at work, you know, the subtitle of No Hard Feelings. What, you know, obviously, like I've always said, like when it comes to, for instance, like I'm trying to make an analogy here. For instance, like when it comes to the language we use as humans, I always felt like audience and intent matter. So we got to think about the audience. Like, is this person going to be offended by me saying fuck or whatever? You know, or I know that this person has attempted suicide, for instance. Like, I need to be mindful of that and be gentler and sort of more accepting of maybe how they sort of describe their experiences around suicide. So when it comes to like embracing emotions at work, I think the same applies. Like, I think and you tell me different, and I want to hear your thoughts on this. Like, we as employees need to be mindful of the people we're around. Like, we can't obviously go in and just start talking openly about how we, you know, had a really sort of terrible, depressive moment. But I do think there's room for that, and there can be space for that. So how do we, like, what's the dividing line? How do you, as an employee, decide like, oh, what do I share and what don't I share, and what emotions do I sort of engage in openly, and what do I need to be mindful of? And does it depend on sort of who you're talking to? I'd love to hear your thoughts about that.
Yeah. So in the book, we spend, I think it's the last chapter, we talk about the line between sharing and oversharing. It is dependent on the relationship. So there are people at work that we become extremely close friends with. And I think those you can share much more openly than with someone that you're not as close with. There's also definitely differences if you're the manager or the employee or the leader. But in general, I would say, I think a nice balance is, again, to speak about your emotions without getting emotional, and then share as much detail as you feel comfortable sharing. But if you're a manager, also think about, well, how would I feel if my manager said this to me? So kind of putting yourself in the other person's shoes, like you mentioned, really trying to gauge your audience. Especially as a manager, you don't want to burden people with more than they can bear. And so I think I was asked a question recently, which was, someone said, you know, if we have a really close family member die, that seems to be okay to talk about in the office. But what if you just went through a breakup, or it's something that's like a little less socially acceptable to just be open about in the workplace? How do you talk about that? And I think we cannot if something is really bothering us, you can't hide that. Like, it's going to come out in your gestures or in your general demeanor. And so I think if it's going to affect your work, if it's going to affect your team, it's really important to flag what's going on with yourself. And again, you don't have to go into a lot of detail because it is the workplace. Not everyone needs to know. Not everyone feels comfortable sharing. But just saying something like, hey, I'm going through a lot right now. I just wanted to let you know I'm still like committed to the job. I'm still here. But I'm just flagging that. So also if it ever seems like I'm being kind of grouchy in a moment, or if I'm sad, it has nothing to do with the team or you. Just want to flag that. And I think that can be a really wonderful way of communicating what's happening, giving people the information to be kinder to you, to be a little more flexible. And then that's also when the people that are close to you will probably say like, hey, what's going on? And then you can have a better conversation. And the people that you're just more on an acquaintance level with might say like, okay, get it. Like, just let me know if there's anything I can do.
Okay.
So yeah, I think flagging it and then, just leaving it a little on the other person to explore more or ask, and then gauging how that conversation goes.
Gotcha. Yeah, that's very helpful. Can you give me and the listeners some kind of tips for just embracing their emotions at work? Just like what are some guidelines?
Yeah, so I think the first is I'll give two that I really love from the book. So one is understand that your feelings aren't facts. And so your feelings are true. So if you're really upset about a situation, I'm not trying to diminish that at all, but always leave space to question your assumptions. So when we have an emotional reaction, it's usually because of something that happened, and it's because of how we perceive the thing that happened. And so it's really important to hopefully you work in a place where you can assume good intentions and then go back and have a conversation about what you're upset about. And a great way to open that conversation is to say, when you did X, I felt Y. And so you're making an observation. When you interrupted me, it didn't make me feel heard. You're not saying like, you're being rude. You're always rude. You're not making these character generalizations that make the other person defensive. And an anecdote from my work life is, a few years ago, I was working at a company and we hired this new employee. And I noticed that every time I asked him a question, when he responded, he would start speaking extremely slowly and over enunciate each word. And I was so mad at him.
I mean, that's making my blood boil.
I know. But then, and so this drove me crazy. And then a few weeks later, the team went out to dinner, and he and I were actually having a pretty good conversation. And without malice, without creating a victim or a perpetrator, I just said, hey, do you notice that when I ask you a question, you start speaking really slowly? Again, simply an observation. And he said, I know, I'm really working on it, but I get really flustered and I want to make sure that I don't look stupid. So I'm just choosing my words really carefully. And then that makes me slow down. And so it was totally, I was very upset. That was a very true feeling, but it was based on a perception that wasn't accurate.
Right.
And so I think leave room for the other person to share their perspective. That maybe he did think I was an idiot, but then you can go from there. So I think that's one tip. And then the other one is, in the workplace, you are going to receive criticism. You need critical feedback to learn and grow. And it feels bad to get that. I think it's a totally normal response, and it's a universal reaction when someone, even if they're doing it in a really kind way, when they're pointing out something that you need to improve, you have this knee jerk, like, no, I'm perfect. And so to feel better in those moments, I recommend keeping a smile file, which is really cheesy, but it's a folder you create on your phone, on your desktop, in your email. And anytime you get a message or someone says something to you that's a thank you, that praises you, that just generally makes you smile or feel really good, you save it to this file. And then when you do get that critical feedback, you can return to this file and see that this one piece of criticism, it's just one data point in the picture of who you are. And so it's great. It's an opportunity for you to improve, but it's not a destruction of your entire sense of self-worth. And so I think it's just really nice to have, again, this like little emotional support folder when you need it.
I love that idea. That's so cool. I think I want to do that for myself because I definitely find myself. I mean, we as humans are the most critical of ourselves, and
Mhm.
then I always have this sort of long gestating underpinning feeling of that I'm not worthy, that I don't deserve love, like all these sort of awful things.
Yeah.
And yeah, smile foul. That's adorable. I love that.
Yeah.
So you do workshops. I'm really fascinated by workshops. Like and from like, tell me how the workshops came into sort of your world, and like, honestly, I'm curious about like how you got started doing them, and like how is it set up? Like what does that look like at these companies? Like what are the activities? Like what's the participation like? Like I'm deeply curious about that.
Yeah. So the workshops came out of the book. And so some of it was just through friends that we had that worked at organizations. And then some, we've gotten more. So the book came out maybe 3 months ago now. And so I think as more people have started reading it and talking about it, we've had more inbound requests. But the workshops are usually for a team, or for a lot of bigger companies have employee resource groups. So that can often be like for women in the workplace, um, or they have interest groups. And so we'll go in and speak to one of those. And the workshops, we like to keep them around 45 minutes to an hour. And one thing that's really important is that it's interactive, because I think emotions at work, you can learn a lot from the research, but there's also so much to learn from your colleagues.
Yeah.
So we really try and facilitate that. And then, yeah, it's really about, we try and make it really practical. So, one of my experiences when I first started getting interested in how do I feel better at work? How do I, just create what do I even want to do? How do I figure that out? I felt that a lot of business books were very high level. So it would say like, be authentic, be vulnerable, find your passion. And I think those are all super valid pieces of advice, but it's so hard to walk into work the next day and then figure out what to do with that, right? Like,
Sure.
what, okay, find my passion. Where do I start?
Yeah.
And
So
so
broad.
yeah, so we, in the book and then in the workshops, we really try and break it out into just small recommendations that have a big impact. So as an example, one in this workshop around belonging, one of the things we say there is, as a small thing that you can do starting tomorrow with your team, is one of the times when we feel the most anxious and when we're most susceptible to imposter syndrome and to feeling like an outsider is when we're new, when we're just starting a job. And a way to help someone feel better is, nowadays, you usually also, when you interview at a company, you interview with more than one person. And so once you've hired someone, you go back to everyone that was involved in the interview process and you ask them on a Post-it note to write 3 things. They should write what really impressed them during the interview, what skills the new person is bringing to the team that the team really needs, and then just one thing that you want to know more about them. It can build off of something that came up in the conversation, or it can be totally random. And then when this person, on their first day, they walk into the office, on their desk are all these little Post-it notes that are essentially like affirmations of, this is not a tryout anymore. We hired you. You're here. We're excited. We need you to be here. And I think that just that small gesture can do a lot in boosting someone's mood. There's, I think it's coming out of Stanford, there's research into what are called belonging interventions. And they're these like half-hour to an hour sessions where people, and they do it, I think most of the research has been around freshmen in college, so people of color or women in engineering programs, and they just sit down and they are told, or they have conversations with upperclassmen who say similar, just, it's normal to feel totally overwhelmed. It's normal to feel like an outsider. It's normal to, especially when you're new, to be like, you do not need to know everything after week 1. You're going to have really hard days. But I had those hard days too, and I ended up like really enjoying my time here and learning a lot. And I think just that simple acknowledgement of, it's hard. It's hard to be new. It's scary. It's overwhelming. No one's expecting you to be amazing on day one. So calm down, give yourself some space to feel the anxiety, to feel bad, reach out to people if you do, but know that you're not the only person that's going through this. That actually has an enormous impact on how people feel a year later, 3 years later, and also in the school settings on their GPA. So for women in engineering programs, the GPA gap there, which usually like widens as school goes on. So by senior year, there's a gap. Women are not doing as well as men. The women that had this intervention, they actually did just as well as men. And so I think it's so powerful just to normalize up and downs and to also really welcome someone into an institution and say, we want you here. This wasn't a fluke. Imposter syndrome, it's totally fine to have it, but don't let it dictate how you act or dictate how you actually think about your ability.
Yeah. Wow. No, that's really beautiful. And I think it makes total sense. You're really just kind of giving people the space to reminding them that they're not alone, first of all.
Yeah.
And reminding them that, I've been there before and I know what you're going through. Like that's an amazing and powerful sort of connection point. So what are you mentioned like sort of the participation element of these workshops. Like what does that look like exactly?
Yeah, so a lot of it is conversation based. So we'll have prompts and we'll have people discuss those prompts. And then they can share out. A lot of it too is so one of the reasons that we have people often pair into duos is that if you have bigger groups, often one person dominates the entire conversation, or if someone's more extroverted, they feel comfortable speaking out and kind of sharing their story, and then the introverts never get a chance to speak or never feel comfortable speaking up. So in a duo, it's always like 1 minute one person, 1 minute the other person. And there's also research that shows that you're more able to form a real connection in that time. And then we give them a prompt, we have them discuss it, and if people are comfortable sharing out, we'll have them share out. We often also do like popcorn style, like what are the words that came up in your conversation a lot? What's an action that came up? Just shout it out, see if there's any similarities. It's usually conversation based around a prompt that has to do with the subject that we're talking about.
Gotcha. No, that makes sense. I remember being back in school and like partnering up. It was always threes. For some reason, it was always threes, and one person wasn't participating, and the other. It was always the sort of big, sort of loud extroverts were always kind of leading the charge, and I was sitting there quietly doing my work, but not connecting.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And for me, as an introvert, I think I'm extra mindful about I often want to talk and want to form a connection, but if the group is too big, I'm just like, well, I don't even know how to start saying anything into this big noisy group.
Yeah. It's like, I'll just sit over here and take notes.
Yeah.
Whatever, no, I hear you 100%. Let's start to kind of like wind it down a little bit. I'm curious, like how did we don't have to go into deep depth about this, but like how did the Liz and Molly start, and how'd you meet Molly, and how'd that connection start?
Yeah, so I was living in San Francisco and then took a job in New York. So I had to move across the country, and I think I had visited New York twice briefly. And I was terrified. I just kept envisioning myself. I think I'm very West Coast in disposition. And so New York scared me. Mm-hmm. I just imagined like landing and then having people yell at me and like say the F word at me and then like not understanding the subway. So I emailed all of my friends and I asked them if there was someone that they really liked that lived in New York to set me up on platonic friend dates. And Molly was actually one of those first friend dates. And I think we had coffee and we kind of immediately bonded. We're both introverts. We both really like taking on creative side projects. And we also are both really bad sleepers. We have very similar intense sleep routines. So I think we were like neurotic and creative in very similar ways, and that formed a friendship. And then, yeah, we started talking a lot about being introverts and extroverted workspaces. I remember I had just come back from a work retreat at my new company, and it was clearly designed by extroverts because it was 2 days and there was no downtime. It was just like meeting, brainstorm, party, dinner, this. And at the end of the 2 days, I was like, I need to get out of here. I just never want to see any of you again. This is way too much for me. So Molly and I started writing, and then I began illustrating. And so we had an article on Susan Cain, who wrote Quiet, a book about introverts. We had an article. Yeah, she's amazing.
I'd love to have her on this podcast.
Yeah, I haven't actually heard her on podcasts in a while. I would love to hear her. So we had an article published on her online platform that did really well. And then kind of as we started talking more, we realized that underlying all of our conversations was just emotions, and kind of the emotions of being an introvert, and how we also both had experiences early on in our careers of kind of burning out of jobs because we couldn't handle, or like not handle, but we just didn't know how to wrap our minds or our words around what we were feeling.
Yeah.
And yeah, that's how we became friends, and then kind of found a really nice working relationship too.
Lovely. Yeah. And Liz and Molly, the sort of the account and the platform is delightful. It's really insightful and funny. And, listeners, if you're not following Liz and Molly on Instagram, do so, because it's a delight. I have two more questions for you. One is, what's your favorite Calvin Hobbes book?
Oh my gosh, I'm blanking on the names. I think there's like Let's Go Exploring was one.
Yeah.
But my favorite, I mean, there's just hilarious ones where he says like there's nothing like the panic or the motivation of like last minute panic or something.
I mean, you don't have to give me a specific like strip. You can give like a book,
I think it's Let's Go Exploring is the name of the book. Yeah. But then I do want to call out my favorite Calvin and Hobbes storyline is when he finds a raccoon and the raccoon dies. And I just remember, and then he and Hobbes have to like grapple with, what does death mean? What's the meaning of life? And it was just like black and white illustrations, very few words. And it's like one of the most touching things I've ever read. So I think that inspired a lot of the illustrations in the book, which is like, it can be really simple and yet like deeply profound.
Yeah. I mean, I remember that strip very clearly. I read so much Calvin Hobbes growing up, and it's Bill Watterson, amazing. Just like,
so great.
I learned so much about life reading Calvin Hobbes.
What was your favorite book?
I mean, I loved Yukon Ho.
Oh yeah.
I did like I forgot the title, but it was like a space sort of sci-fi, like
like Space Invader. Yeah.
I always forget the names. We actually have the big sort of hardbound set of like all of them together, which is pretty fantastic. But yeah, I mean, I remember like as a kid, just like imagining myself as Calvin, like in the woods, just kind of exploring. Like that was like where my imagination went. It was the best.
Yeah. So good.
And then the last question I have for you is, what do you do about self-care? What's your self-care practice like?
Yeah. So my self-care, I am someone who needs a lot of alone time. And so I have started, because I also have a really hard time saying no to social stuff or no to fun projects. And so I've actually started on my calendar blocking off 3 evenings a night and saying, Liz, you cannot do anything on this evening. The only thing you can do is come home or go to the gym and just read a book and listen to podcasts and be by yourself. And I found
3 evenings. You said 3 evenings a night.
Oh, sorry. Yes, 3 evenings a week.
Okay, yeah.
And I found that that's like what I need to not feel absolutely at the end of my rope on Fridays or even at the end of a weekend. And then I think just like drawing for me is a very meditative experience. I've tried a lot of the like sitting down, closing your eyes, lying down meditation, and somehow it just gives me too much. Like, I just don't like being so aware of the fact that I'm like a conscious being in a body. So I'd much rather like go for a hike or just put on music and draw and like actually do something physical and get into a flow state. And I think that has the same benefits for me as meditation without all the like existential angst.
All the death thinking.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Too much.
No, I relate to that immensely. I've tried sort of the classic sit down meditation style, and I don't know if it's for me. I like to hike and run, and those are kind of I try to make those my meditative activities.
Yeah, I'm very much.
Yeah. No, and I love the idea of like blocking off days in the week. I think that's those are great boundaries you're creating for yourself. Like, and you recognizing that like, oh, I have a problem saying no sometimes. So this is like another way to preemptively say no.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Exactly.
That's great. Well, we always wrap up the show talking about our empathy heroes. These are people in our lives. Could be actually characters from books, could be characters from movies, authors we love, people we know personally, friends, family, etc. Doesn't matter. Just someone who's like a really good empathetic person. I will name mine first to give you, Liz, a moment to think on your empathy hero. My empathy hero this week is Isaac Asimov, the writer. And I just really love this quote from him, and I will say it right now. Quote, your assumptions are your windows on the world. Scrub them off every once in a while or the light won't come in, end quote. And I, like, that really hit me right in the heart. Like, I just love the idea of, I think we as humans go through the world and we make assumptions. Like, that's such a natural human thing to do. And I think those assumptions can come from a good place. They can be valid. They could even be true. But I think checking your assumptions, and you talked about this earlier, Liz, checking your assumptions and not relying on it necessarily. Like, think about like the other side of it. Maybe try some empathy. Think about all the perspectives, like, because assumptions can get you into trouble. Assumptions like say that you know a thing, you already know a thing, but the truth is like we can't know unless we have all the facts and we interact with the world in a way that's whole and full and sort of allowing others to be a part of it. And so I love that quote, and that's why Isaac Asimov is my empathy hero this week.
I love that. I'm going to say, I'm sure this has come up before, but I just love Brene Brown.
She's come up before, but it doesn't mean you can't. I mean, she's your personal empathy hero. That's great. She is amazing.
Another vote for Brene Brown. And I really love, especially what she writes about shame. And I think she says that like shame corrodes the part of us that thinks we can change. And I was actually also just looking at research that shows like how demotivational and poisonous shame can be, and always flipping that to be like, well, okay, there's this thing that maybe I want to work on or that's imperfect, but how can I improve, or how can I see the beauty in it, and just trying to step out of feeling so much shame around especially our emotions.
Yeah, that's amazing. I've read some stuff on shame that she's written, and yeah, she's amazing.
So good.
She's one of my dream guests to have on You Me Empathy, for sure.
Yeah, she's like everything she says, I'm just like, yes.
Yes, I know. It's just like she's like speaking directly to my heart, and just like,
I know.
Wow, mind blowing.
Yeah.
Well, Liz, where can the You Me Empathy Feely Humans connect with you online and read No Hard Feelings, your new book?
Yeah, so No Hard Feelings is online. It's also at your local bookstore, or they can order it. And then we are Liz and Molly. Molly is Mollie. And so that's on Instagram. And then also our website is lizandmolly.com. And on there we have assessments you can take to better understand your emotions and some guides to giving feedback, receiving feedback. So there's a lot of useful stuff in there that's not in the book.
Awesome. Well, listeners, all those links will be in the show notes for this episode. Liz, thank you so much for being a guest on You Me Empathy.
Yeah, thanks so much for having me. This was a wonderful conversation. I appreciate coming on.
Oh, lovely to hear. And to you listeners, I'm here, you're here. We're here together on this wayward, overwhelming, awe-inspiring pale blue dot. We have each other. It's You, Me, Empathy.